Today's video is a very simple watercolor painting using Prang watercolors. I'll be painting multiple watermelons using wet on wet techniques, and this is great for beginners. If you love learning about art, hit that subscribe button so you never miss a weekly tutorial. Today I am using a piece of Arches watercolor paper that I tore out of my sketchbook and a set of Prang watercolors. These work really nice and they're very affordable, perfect for the classroom or at-home artists. As you can see, there's no pencil in my hand. I'm not going to sketch out my watermelon slices. I'm simply going to use a lot of water on my brush and I'm going to make these kind of organic triangles using red. Then I will go back and make them a little bit darker, and you can also see the water is taking that red and I'm leaving areas of white, which will make it look like highlights and just a beautiful kind of juicy slice of watermelon. Let's repeat these steps. So I'm doing 3 lines, filling it in, leaving a little bit of white, dipping my brush back in, and a paper towel can be your best friend for leaving those nice textured white areas. And then I like to do a second layer just to give it that three-dimensional look, that shadow look. Now look how textured, and it already looks like a slice of watermelon because I'm letting the water free flow, and then I'm using a paper towel to give it that texture. I'm using a variety of reds here. You can see the first one I use is a little bit more red orange, and the second one is a little bit more of a pure red. I'm going to speed things up here because I'm going to repeat these steps over and over. If all you have is a simple Prang watercolor palette with just one red, you can totally do that. Otherwise, it's really fun to play around with red orange, even orange itself. Magenta is a fun one to play with, just to kind of see what dynamic color combinations you can make. You can keep it really simple, or you can really play around with color. Now, as you can see, I'm repeating each technique for each slice of watermelon, and my triangle has a curved end because when you slice it, you want that green to be a curved, not a straight line. And this is a watercolor pattern. I'm not just doing one slice. They're kind of all over the page in a way that they wouldn't naturally sit. And a good key to composition, if you're doing something like this, is make sure you switch up the angles, and going off the page is really important. You can see here, I'm gonna go off the page on the left-hand side. It was very awkward, it felt incomplete. There's this awkward white space at the top, so I'm gonna fill it with more slices. So I've got my organic triangle, I'm dipping a second time to create that shadow and that darker orange, and then blotting as needed to create those white highlights. Timing is key with watercolor, and now that the paint has dried slightly, I'm going to go back in with that first red that's a little bit darker, and I'm going to add a little bit of texture and a little bit of a shadowed edge since I did a little blotting. Now, let your paint dry a little bit before going in to do your second color. I picked kind of a medium green. If you only have one green on your palette, that's totally fine. This is kind of a medium yellowish green. And I'm going to put a curved line, kind of like a rainbow, with a gap in between. Now, some of it, it's not touching the red paint, but it's okay if it gets in there a little bit. So again, timing is really important and knowing when to layer. You can see that the red from that one watermelon on the right bottom corner is bleeding into the green, but I love that effect. And as long as it doesn't go too crazy and you can see the colors, that's the fun of the loose watercolor style. Okay, now that we have that darker green, I'm going to use a yellow green here, and I'm going to paint using the wet on wet technique. So what that means is you're going to apply wet paint on top of wet paint before it dries. There's not a huge variation in these two colors, so if you're working with a limited palette, try out a little bit of yellow on your brush or mix yellow and green at the top of your palette. But I want it to have a slight fade where it's dark on the outside and it kind of fades to a yellow green, still leaving that gap for now because watermelon gets lighter and it has this kind of, before you get to the rind, this kind of light pink white area. My next step will be painting the seeds, and it's important to let your paint dry completely before adding something on top that you need to be a controlled shape. Now, you could use black, but I'm not going to. I'm going to use a variation of color here. I'm going to use that darkest brown, a little bit of purple, and a little bit of blue. Now, black is a great color, don't get me wrong, but I like to mix my own kind of neutral dark color. So that dark brown, that blue, and then purple really make a beautiful dynamic color that looks like watermelon seeds. I'm taking a small brush with a point and I'm just randomly putting watermelon seeds here. If you want it to look natural, change kind of the shape and direction of your seeds. If you make them too symmetrical, it'll look like an alien slice of watermelon, so you want to kind of keep it loose and organic. Unless robots are your thing and you want to make a perfect robot watermelon, I won't fault you for that. And I'm just going to put kind of a random amount of seeds going all the way off to the edge and changing the slight direction of each one. Now that my green and red paint have dried completely, I'm going to take my paintbrush that's dirty, so it has a little bit of red paint on it, and I'm going to swipe with so much water on my brush the edges of where the white separates the green and the red. The paint's dry, but it might, with the water, pick up a little bit of that paint, and that makes it not just a stark white in between section, but a little bit of like a loose pink color to connect those edges so it doesn't look quite so separate. It's a little bit scary, so you can always layer, so a light color on your brush is key. Now for my favorite part, shadows in the background. And I'm going to mix a color similar to what I did with the seeds, but I'm going to rely on a little bit more blue and a lot of water. So you can see this is a very neutral color. It's pretty brown here, and so much water on my brush. You can always layer and add more shadows. And this dark blue, I really like it for this kind of shadow technique. So then I'm going to go around and create a small shadow on the edges. Now I'm not focusing on realism here. I didn't set up a still life and like put a light source directly on my watermelon. I do want to keep it consistent. I'm going to stay kind of on my right hand edge, but you'll see I'll kind of pop a shadow in other places. So this one's a little bit dark. I'm going to add water to my brush and then spread it out, which is pretty natural, right? The shadow would be darker closer to the object, and then as it spreads away, it would fade out. Now, what I love about this technique is with the water, you're gonna wake up some of that paint from other areas. And that's the fun part of watercolor, is letting go, letting kind of the loose quality of water mixing with paint take over and create areas that you don't have to have hyper control over. Again, a paper towel is gonna be your friend if you add too much water, you feel as if things are too dark. And I'm going to repeat these steps using that neutral color I created with that darker blue and then that brown. You can use the exact same color you used for the seeds, and then just a lot of water on your brush would work as well. I just felt like playing around with a little bit more of a color variation. So I'm just going around here, adding shadows to each one, and then making them bleed into other areas. It's already really coming to life, and look at that beautiful area where the green is kind of bleeding into the shadow. I just love that. The red kind of did the same with the green. Now that I have a beautiful base layer, I'm going to layer a darker color for depth. So I'm actually dipping my brush in that water or that seed color that I made. And this is a wet on wet technique again, but I have very little paint on my brush. I'm trying to get just a little bit, and I'm going to layer closest to the watermelon and let the water pull that to create that darker dynamic shadow I was talking about. You can see here that the purple that was in that color is really coming to life. And so this has a little bit more of a violet color to it, more purple than the more blue kind of gray color I created before. The beauty of shadows is it's all depending on reflected light and the environment that it's in. So you can really have fun creating shadow colors that are neutral. Let's repeat this step until each shadow has a beautiful dynamic second layer to create a darker shadow. Once we're done with that, I'm going to take my brush with a lot of water on it, and I'm going to pull that shadow into the background. This might be my favorite step of all because there's nothing you can do to go wrong. I'm just creating dynamic, very subtle shadows, waking up some of that pink and red in the watermelon. And this is just making the background not be so flat and boring. A little bit of white space with a watercolor painting is totally fine. I always tell my students in an oil painting or an acrylic painting, you don't want to leave the white of your paper or canvas, but with watercolor, the restraint to leave areas white is key when using watercolor paint. I'm feeling good. I think I'm done. I'm going to take off these two little pieces of tape. It would have been fun to tape all the edges. I just forgot. And bam. Thank you so much for sticking around and making art with me. And if you're interested in more watercolor tutorials, check these out. Find me on Instagram at thatartteacher_Machado to see what my students are up to in my classroom. And my website, thatartteacher.com, has full-length lesson plans, student examples, and rubrics, all for free.